Why is it that no matter how many times you tell yourself, this time I will stay consistent, it always seems to fall apart? You start with fire in your chest, a burst of motivation pushing you forward. Maybe it's a new workout plan, a morning routine, or a commitment to finally build that side project. The first few days feel electric. You're energized, hopeful, even proud of yourself. But then, slowly, the cracks begin to show. One skipped day turns into two. That journal you promised to write in every morning starts collecting dust. The workout shoes stay tucked in the corner. And soon, you're back at square one, disappointed in yourself, wondering, why can't I just stay consistent? If this sounds like your story, you're not alone. In fact, this is one of the most common struggles people face, yet it's also one of the most misunderstood. We tend to label ourselves as lazy, undisciplined, or weak-willed. We believe that everyone else has some magical power that we lack, as if consistency is a talent reserved for a select few. But here is the truth, your inconsistency isn't a sign of weakness. It's not proof that you're broken. It's a signal that something deeper is happening beneath the surface. And until you uncover that deeper reason, you'll always feel like you're fighting a losing battle. Think about the last time you truly felt motivated. Maybe it was the start of a new year, when you set resolutions and promised yourself that this year would be different. Or maybe it was after watching an inspiring video that lit a fire under you. In that moment, you felt unstoppable. But then life got in the way. Stress at work, family obligations, bad sleep, or even just the natural dip of motivation, all of it piled up, and suddenly that fire burned out. You told yourself you'd get back on track tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. And each time the cycle repeats, your confidence takes another hit. You stop trusting yourself. You start believing that maybe you're just not cut out for consistency. That's the emotional trap most people live in. We confuse a lack of consistency with a lack of worth. We beat ourselves up, thinking that if only we tried harder, if only we were tougher, we would finally break free. But trying harder doesn't solve the problem. It just makes the crash hurt even more when we eventually stumble. Because the real problem isn't effort. It's not about how badly you want it. It's about something far more subtle, something most people never stop to notice. And here is what makes it worse. The world around us is built to feed inconsistency. Every distraction, every notification, every quick dopamine hit is designed to pull us off track. Social media makes it easier to chase instant gratification. Our brains are wired to crave comfort over discipline. And when you're living in that environment, staying consistent feels like swimming against the current. You might push hard for a little while, but eventually, the current wins unless you understand what's really happening underneath. So the next time you find yourself frustrated, staring at another abandoned routine, remember this, it's not because you're lazy. It's not because you don't have what it takes. It's because you have been fighting the wrong battle. You have been blaming yourself for a struggle that nearly everyone faces, without realizing that there's a deeper force at play. And until you uncover it, you'll always feel trapped in this cycle. But here is the good news. Once you understand the real reason, everything changes. You'll stop seeing yourself as broken. You'll stop relying on sheer willpower, only to collapse when it runs out. Instead, you'll discover a way to build consistency that feels natural, effortless, and sustainable. The truth is, you don't need more motivation, you need a different perspective. You don't need to become someone new overnight, you just need to start seeing the game for what it really is. And that's what this journey is about. It's not another motivational speech telling you to grind harder. It's not about pretending consistency is easy. It's about exposing the hidden reasons why you keep falling short and showing you how to finally break the cycle. Because once you see it clearly, you never approach your goals the same way again. So before we dive into the solution, let me leave you with this thought. What if the reason you can't stay consistent isn't because of who you are, but because of how you have been taught to think about consistency in the first place? What if the problem isn't that you're not disciplined enough, but that you have been fighting the wrong battle all along? That's the question we're about to answer. And once you understand it, you never look at your habits, your goals, or yourself the same way again. Think about the cycle you have probably been trapped in countless times. You feel a surge of motivation, you set a goal, and for a while, you stick with it. Maybe you're hitting the gym, eating clean, journaling every morning, or staying consistent with your studies. But then, out of nowhere, you miss a day. That one day feels harmless, but it slowly snowballs. Before you know it, you have completely abandoned the habit, and the guilt sets in. You tell yourself you'll restart tomorrow, but tomorrow feels harder than today. Soon, you're right back where you started, carrying the weight of another broken promise to yourself. This pattern is not just a coincidence. It's a psychological trap. And here is the part most people never understand. Inconsistency isn't about laziness. It's about the hidden war happening inside your brain. On one side, you have your logical brain, the part of you that sets goals, makes plans, and thinks long-term. On the other side, you have your emotional brain, the part that craves comfort, leisure, and instant gratification. The logical brain says, wake up early and go to the gym. The emotional brain says, stay in bed, it's warm and cozy. And more often than not, the emotional brain wins. Why? Because your emotional brain is faster, louder, and more persuasive. It's designed to keep you safe and comfortable. Evolution wired you to avoid discomfort because, for thousands of years, discomfort meant danger. Resting, eating, conserving energy, these were survival strategies. But now, in today's world, those same instincts sabotage your goals. That's why staying consistent feels so hard. Every time you try to push forward, you're battling biology itself. But it doesn't stop there. The deeper trap is the cycle of guilt. Here is how it works. You start with motivation. You feel strong, energized, and hopeful. But when you inevitably slip up, guilt takes over. That guilt doesn't inspire you to get back on track. It actually drains your energy and confidence. You tell yourself, I'll start fresh next week, but by then the spark has faded. Motivation is gone, and you're left with frustration. Then something inspires you again, you restart, and the cycle repeats. Motivation, action, slip, guilt, restart. Over and over. It's like running on a broken treadmill. No matter how hard you push, you're not getting anywhere. And every time you fall off, you start to believe there's something wrong with you. You begin to internalize the failure. Maybe I'm just not consistent. Maybe I don't have what it takes. That belief alone is powerful enough to kill your progress, because once you see yourself as someone who can't stick to anything, your brain looks for evidence to confirm it. One skipped day turns into proof of your weakness, and soon you have convinced yourself that consistency is simply not possible for you. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine your mind is like a leaking water tank. You keep pouring in effort, motivation, and willpower, but the leak, your emotional brain and guilt cycle, keeps draining it out. No matter how much you pour in, it never fills. The problem isn't that you're not pouring enough water. The problem is the leak. And unless you fix that leak, you'll always be stuck in the same exhausting pattern. Another hidden layer is the environment around you. Everything is designed to trigger your emotional brain. Social media, fast food, endless entertainment, they all promise quick pleasure with zero effort. When you live in a world where instant gratification is only a click away, of course your brain is going to struggle with consistency. Every time you try to focus, there's a distraction waiting to pull you away. And here is the key. Distractions don't just waste time, they rewire your brain to expect quick rewards. That makes long-term consistency feel even harder because your brain becomes addicted to shortcuts. So the real reason you can't stay consistent is not that you're broken. It's that your brain is wired to prioritize short-term comfort over long-term growth, and your environment constantly feeds that wiring. That's why motivation always fades, and that's why willpower feels like trying to hold your breath underwater. You can do it for a while, but eventually, your body forces you back up for air. But here is the thing. Once you understand this, the frustration starts to make sense. You realize you have been fighting battles you were never designed to win with willpower alone. You see that inconsistency is not a personal flaw, but a predictable result of psychology. And that understanding is powerful because it opens the door to a new approach. Because if the problem isn't discipline, then the solution isn't more discipline either. It's not about pushing harder or trying to be superhuman. It's about learning how to work with your brain, not against it. It's about shifting the way you approach habits so that consistency stops being a daily fight and starts becoming a natural part of who you are. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Because once you uncover this hidden truth, the question changes. It's no longer, how can I force myself to stay consistent? It becomes, how can I make consistency effortless? And the answer lies in breaking the cycle, not by chasing motivation, but by rewiring your identity. Here is the turning point, the place where everything shifts. Up until now, you have been trapped in the same exhausting cycle, bursts of motivation, moments of progress, and then the inevitable crash into inconsistency. But what if I told you the problem isn't your lack of discipline at all? What if the real reason you can't stay consistent is because you have been building your habits on the wrong foundation? Most people approach consistency with willpower. They think, if I just push harder, if I just grind more, I'll finally stick with it. And for a while, it works. You can run on pure determination for a few days, maybe even a few weeks. But willpower is like a battery. It drains with use. Stress, lack of sleep, unexpected problems, all of these drain your willpower faster than you can recharge it. And once that battery runs out, you collapse back into old habits. That's why no matter how many times you tell yourself, this time I will stay consistent, it never lasts. You're relying on the weakest possible fuel. The shift comes when you stop relying on willpower and start anchoring your habits in identity. Instead of saying, I want to run 3 times a week, you begin saying, I am a runner. Instead of saying, I want to read more, you say, I am a reader. This is not just semantics. Identity changes everything. Because once a habit becomes tied to who you are, it stops being something you force and starts being something you embody. Think about it. If you see yourself as a smoker, quitting feels impossible because every cigarette reinforces your identity. But if you shift to seeing yourself as a non-smoker, suddenly each cigarette doesn't fit who you are anymore. In the same way, if you identify as someone who's trying to go to the gym, every skipped workout feels like a failure. But if you see yourself as an athlete, skipping a workout feels unnatural. Your brain doesn't argue with who you are. Here is a story to make this real. There was a man who struggled with dieting his whole life. Every January, he'd start a new plan, count calories, restrict himself, and last maybe a few weeks before giving up. He thought he just didn't have enough discipline. But one year, he made a simple shift. Instead of chasing diets, he started to see himself as a healthy person. He asked himself before every meal, what would a healthy person eat? At first, the changes were small, adding a vegetable here, drinking water instead of soda. But over time, those small choices stacked up. And because it wasn't about forcing discipline anymore, it felt natural. A few years later, he didn't just lose weight, he kept it off, because he had become the type of person who lived healthy. That's the power of identity. Now, let's talk about how you actually make this shift. First, reframe your goals. Instead of focusing on outcomes, focus on identities. The outcome is what you want, the identity is who you want to be. Outcome: I want to write a book. Identity: I am a writer. Outcome: I want to meditate daily. Identity: I am someone who values stillness. Once you shift your language, you shift your perspective. Second, start with micro wins. Your brain builds identity through evidence. Every small action is a vote for the person you want to become. When you meditate for 2 minutes, you're casting a vote for being someone who meditates. When you write one paragraph, you're casting a vote for being a writer. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is building evidence. Over time, those tiny wins add up and solidify into a rock-solid identity. Third, rebuild trust with yourself. One of the biggest reasons people fail is because they have broken so many promises to themselves that they don't believe their own words anymore. Every time you say, I'll start tomorrow, and don't, you weaken your self-trust. So instead of setting massive, unrealistic goals, set ridiculously small ones that you can actually keep. Do 5 push-ups instead of promising an hour at the gym. Write 1 sentence instead of demanding 1,000 words. Keep those promises, and slowly, you rebuild the trust you lost. That trust becomes the foundation of long-term consistency. And here is the beautiful part. Once you build from identity, consistency stops being about effort. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up every morning and say, I need motivation to brush my teeth today. You just do it, because it's part of who you are. That's the place you want your habits to reach, where they feel automatic, inevitable, and natural. But let's be honest. The shift isn't instant. You don't become a new person overnight. At first, you'll feel resistance. Your old identity will try to pull you back. You'll have moments where the emotional brain screams for comfort. That's normal. The key is not to be perfect but to keep casting votes for your new identity. Even if you slip, the act of returning proves to yourself that this is who you are now. So imagine this: instead of chasing bursts of motivation, you begin living from your identity. You don't try to be consistent, you simply are consistent. The gym isn't a battle, it's just something you do because you're an athlete. Writing isn't a chore, it's who you are as a creator. Eating well isn't torture, it's what healthy people do, and you're healthy. That's when consistency becomes effortless. And once you taste that shift, you realize the truth: you were never inconsistent because you were weak. You were inconsistent because you were building on willpower instead of identity. Now, with this new perspective, you finally have the power to break the cycle. But before we close, there's one more piece to this puzzle. Because even when you shift your identity, there's something else you need to remember, something that will determine whether you sustain this new version of yourself or slip back into old patterns. And that final piece is the choice you make every single day about who you want to become. At this point, you know the truth. Consistency isn't about being superhuman. It's not about grinding harder than everyone else or waking up at 4 a.m. with endless motivation. It's about identity, about building trust with yourself, and about casting votes for the person you want to become. But here is the final piece, the choice. Because at the end of the day, no strategy, no psychology hack, no inspirational video can make the choice for you. You decide who you are becoming. Consistency is not perfection. Let that sink in. Too many people think staying consistent means never missing a day, never slipping, never falling short. And because they can't hit that impossible standard, they give up. But the truth is, consistency is about alignment, not perfection. It's about making the choice, again and again, to return to the path you have chosen. Even if you fall off, even if you stumble, you can always step back on. That's what defines consistent people, not that they never fail, but that they never stay down. Every action you take is a vote for your future self. When you wake up and go for that short walk, you're voting for being healthy. When you write a page in your notebook, you're voting for being a writer. When you choose water over soda, you're voting for being someone who values energy and clarity. The votes don't need to be perfect, but they need to keep coming. And over time, the identity you have been casting votes for becomes who you are. Here is the empowering truth. You don't have to wait for a new year, a Monday, or a fresh start to be consistent. You don't need the perfect conditions. You don't need to wait for motivation to magically appear. You can start proving to yourself today who you really are. And once you take that step, something amazing happens. You stop chasing consistency like it's some finish line out there, and you begin living it as part of your daily existence. So ask yourself right now, who do you want to be? Not just what goals do you want to achieve, but what kind of person do you want to embody? Because the moment you decide, every small action becomes a chance to align with that version of you. And yes, you'll have days where you fall short. You'll have days where old habits call your name. But if you keep choosing your future self, one vote at a time, you look back months or years from now and realize you didn't just become consistent, you became someone you're proud of. The real reason you have struggled with consistency all these years isn't because you're broken. It's because you have been looking in the wrong place. But now, you have the truth. And with that truth comes power. The power to rewrite your story, the power to live as the person you have always known you could be, the power to stop waiting and start becoming. So don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Start now. Start small. Start with one vote, one action, one choice. And remember, consistency isn't something you chase. It's something you embody. Choose your future self today.